boats hoisted in, and the Aorai pointing her nose out to sea. And near her, just come in from the sea on the wings of the squall, he saw another schooner hove to and dropping a boat into the water. He knew her. It was the Orohena, owned by Toriki, the half-caste trader who served as his own supercargo and doubtlessly was even then in the stern sheets of the boat. Huru chuckled. He knew that Mapuhi owed Toriki for trade goods advanced the year before. The squall had passed. The hot sun was blazing down and the lagoon was once more a mirror. But the air was sticky like mucilage, and the weight of it seemed to burden the lungs and make breathing difficult. "Have you heard the news, Toriki?" Huru asked. "Mapuhi has found a pearl. Never was there a pearl like it ever fished up in Hikueru, nor anywhere in the Paumotus, nor anywhere in all the world. Mapuhi is a fool. Besides, he owes you money. Remember that I told you first. Have you any tobacco?" And to the grass shack of Mapuhi went Toriki. He was a masterful man, withal a fairly stupid one. Carelessly he glanced at the wonderful pearl, glanced for a moment only, and carelessly he dropped it into his pocket. "You are lucky," he said. "It is a nice pearl. I will give you credit on the books." "I want a house," Mapuhi began in consternation. "It must be 6 fathoms." "6 fathoms your grandmother," was the trader's retort. "You want to pay up your debts, that's what you want. You owed me $1,200 Chile. Very well, you owe them no longer. The account is squared. Besides, I will give you credit for 200 Chile. If, when I get to Tahiti, the pearl sells well, I will give you credit for another 100. That will make 300. But mind, only if the pearl sells well. I may even lose money on it." Mapuhi folded his arms in sorrow and sat with bowed head. He had been robbed of his pearl. In place of the house he had paid a debt. There was nothing to show for the pearl. "You are a fool," said Tefara. "You are a fool," said Nauri, his mother. "Why did you let the pearl into his hand?" "What was I to do?" Mapuhi protested. "I owed him the money. He knew I had the pearl. You heard him yourself ask to see it. I had not told him. He knew. Someone else told him, and I owed him the money." "Mapuhi is a fool," mimicked Nagarua. She was 12 years old and did not know any better. Mapuhi relieved his feelings by sending her reeling from a box on the ear, while Tefara and Nauri burst into tears and continued to upbraid him after the manner of women. Huru, watching on the beach, saw a third schooner that he knew heave to outside the entrance and drop a boat. It was the Hira, well named, for she was owned by Levi, the German Jew, the greatest pearl buyer of them all, and, as well known, Hira was the Tahitian god of fishermen and thieves. "Have you heard the news?" Huru asked, as Levi, a fat man with massive asymmetrical features, stepped out onto the beach. "Mapuhi has found a pearl. There was never a pearl like it in Hikueru, in all the Paumotus, in all the world. Mapuhi is a fool. He has sold it to Toriki for 1,400 Chile. I listened outside and heard. Toriki is likewise a fool. You can buy it from him cheap. Remember that I told you first. Have you any tobacco?" "Where is Toriki?" "In the house of Captain Lynch, drinking absinthe. He has been there an hour." And while Levi and Toriki drank absinthe and chaffered over the pearl, Huru listened and heard the stupendous price of 25,000 francs agreed upon. It was at this time that both the Orohena and the Hira, running in close to shore, began firing guns and signaling frantically. The 3 men stepped outside in time to see the 2 schooners go hastily about and head offshore, dropping mainsails and flying jibs on the run in the teeth of the squall that heeled them far over on the whitened water. Then the rain blotted them out. "They'll be back after it's over," said Toriki. "We'd better be getting out of here." "I reckon the glass has fallen some more," said Captain Lynch. He was a white-bearded sea captain, too old for service, who had learned that the only way to live on comfortable terms with his asthma was on Hikueru. He went inside to look at the barometer. "Great God!" they heard him exclaim, and rushed in to join him at staring at a dial, which marked 29:20. Again they came out, this time anxiously to consult sea and sky. The squall had cleared away, but the sky remained overcast. The two schooners, under all sail and joined by a third, could be seen making back. A veer in the wind induced them to slack off sheets, and 5 minutes afterwards a sudden veer from the opposite quarter caught all three schooners aback, and those on shore could see the boom tackles being slacked away or cast off on the jump. The sound of the surf was loud, hollow, and menacing, and a heavy swell was setting in. A terrible sheet of lightning burst before their eyes, illuminating the dark day, and the thunder rolled wildly about them. Toriki and Levy broke into a run for their boats, the latter ambling along like a panic-stricken hippopotamus. As their two boats swept out the entrance, they passed the boat of the Aorai coming in. In the stern sheets, encouraging the rowers, was Raoul. Unable to shake the vision of the pearl from his mind, he was returning to accept Mapuhi's price of a house. He landed on the beach in the midst of a driving thunder squall that was so dense that he collided with Huru Huru before he saw him. "Too late!" yelled Huru Huru. Mapuhi sold it to Toriki for 1,400 Chili, and Toriki sold it to Levy for 25,000 francs, and Levy will sell it in France for 100,000 francs. Have you any tobacco?" Raoul felt relieved. His troubles about the pearl were over. He need not worry any more, even if he had not got the pearl. But he did not believe Huru Huru. Mapuhi might well have sold it for 1,400 Chili, but that Levy, who knew pearls, should have paid 25,000 francs was too wide a stretch. Raoul decided to interview Captain Lynch on the subject, but when he arrived at that ancient mariner's house, he found him looking wide-eyed at the barometer. "What do you read it?" Captain Lynch asked anxiously, rubbing his spectacles and staring again at the instrument. 29:10, said Raoul. "I have never seen it so low before." "I should say not," snorted the captain. "50 years, boy and man on all the seas, and I've never seen it go down to that. Listen." They stood for a moment while the surf rumbled and shook the house. Then they went outside. The squall had passed. They could see the Aorai lying becalmed a mile away and pitching and tossing madly in the tremendous seas that rolled in stately procession down out of the northeast and flung themselves furiously upon the coral shore. One of the sailors from the boat pointed at the mouth of the passage and shook his head. Raoul looked and saw a white anarchy of foam and surge. "I guess I'll stay with you tonight, Captain," he said, then turned to the sailor and told him to haul the boat out and to find shelter for himself and fellows. 29 flat, Captain Lynch reported, coming out from another look at the barometer, a chair in his hand. He sat down and stared at the spectacle of the sea. The sun came out, increasing the sultriness of the day, while the dead calm still held. The seas continued to increase in magnitude. "What makes that sea is what gets me," Raoul muttered petulantly. "There is no wind, yet look at it. Look at that fellow there." Miles in length, carrying tens of thousands of tons in weight, its impact shook the frail atoll like an earthquake. Captain Lynch was startled. "Gracious!" he bellowed, half rising from his chair, then sinking back. "But there is no wind," Raoul persisted. "I could understand it if there was wind along with it." "You'll get the wind soon enough without worrying for it," was the grim reply. The two men sat on in silence. The sweat stood out on their skin in myriads of tiny drops that ran together, forming blotches of moisture, which, in turn, coalesced into rivulets that dripped to the ground. They panted for breath, the old man's efforts being especially painful. A sea swept up the beach, licking around the trunks of the coconuts and subsiding almost at their feet. "Way past high water mark," Captain Lynch remarked, "and I've been here 11 years." He looked at his watch. "It is 3 o'clock." A man and woman, at their heels a motley following of brats and curs, trailed disconsolately by. They came to a halt beyond the house and, after much irresolution, sat down in the sand. A few minutes